Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to Geeks Not Nerds, the podcast. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
And today, Dan and I are doing a random impromptu show on Ninja Turtles. We were hanging out and thinking, hey, let's make a video. Dan was like, what should we make a video about? And I was like, I don't know, Ninja Turtles? He was like, what specifically about Ninja Turtles? I said, well, we're going to do a podcast, so we'll do a whole full half hour, so let's just do, Ninja Turtles. He's like, all right. So then I turn on the record button and I push the record button, and now we're going to talk about Ninja Turtles. So Dan, you are a little bit younger than me, so you would not have remembered the original series while it was airing probably very much at all.
No, I did not watch it on television. The how I was exposed to it was my cousin was a big Ninja Turtles fan when he was a kid, and through hand-me-downs, he had given me a bunch of videotapes that had come in Burger King Happy Meals back when they gave actual cool stuff in those. And,
I had those too, yeah.
And that's how I watched the show, and that's how I was exposed to them. And now I'm a pretty big fan of the Ninja Turtles, I guess.
So you actually
characters quite a bit.
So you actually got to be exposed to it the way a lot of us did, even though you're younger than I am. So that was the first version you saw.
It was, and I'm not as familiar with that show as some of people that watch it on TV would be, obviously, because I only had the episodes that were on the VHS tapes. And I haven't went back and bought all of the DVDs and stuff. I'd really like to now that they've released it in a set that's in the Turtle Van as opposed to the convoluted way it was released before.
I have that set. It's awesome.
Yeah, I'd really like to get it. But the main thing that I think kept me going as a fan, because I probably would have forgot about it, to be honest, if the 2003 series hadn't come along and made me really appreciate that there was some merit to liking this, that there was actually some thought and good storytelling ideas behind it. Because you watch the 87 cartoon and you think it's just sort of light kid cartoon 80s fun like G.I. Joe or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you go to the old show, and it had 10 seasons, by the way, and... Yeah,
it set the record for one of the longest running show on television, I think, at the time that it was canceled.
At least animated. So, it was on forever, and it really was kind of the same thing every episode. I mean, basically, the way I always broke it down is there were the Krang episodes, there's Shredder Krang episodes, and the ones that didn't have Shredder and Krang in. And if Shredder and Krang was not in an episode, it wasn't as good.
No, it wasn't, because those two were so responsible for a lot of the funny comedic beats, in my opinion. Just watching those two get frustrated with each other was hilarious.
Yeah, that was where the comic gold came from. And it's funny because the Ninja Turtles, in my opinion, were not actually as funny in that show as they are in the more serious things. Like, the Turtles themselves, that's not where a lot of the comedy was derived.
Yeah, it's almost like they played it sort of like the 60s Batman thing, where, they play everything kind of straight-laced, and they're in this really goofy world, and they don't really get to that, I guess.
No, none of the weird things that happen there bother them. I mean, like there's an episode where all of gravity turns off, and it's like another day at the office.
Yeah, exactly. Did you ever read any of the original Mirage comics up until they started, collecting them when IDW got the rights? Because that was the first time I had ever read them. Ironically, Eastman and Laird are from, my area. They created the Turtles in a house, 20 minutes from where I live. It was a big indie thing in my area, but I never was really exposed to it, obviously, because it started in the 80s.
That's cool, yeah. I did read some of that. Vince had it in trade in an old trade from years ago, and I first got to read the whole original major run from Vince back when we met back in college. I had read an issue here or there before that from collections I had bought out from people where there would be an issue here or there. But I finally got to read that story in its entirety. So I had already been exposed to obviously the films and the 2003 series before I ever got to read that. So I knew that there was an edgier thing, and that's what it started off as. I knew that it was that they were kind of aping Frank Miller and making fun of that stuff, and I knew that it was supposed to be kind of a parody. What's fun though about the Mirage comics as a parody is that they read like their own entity.
They do.
Like it doesn't feel like it's just like if you don't know the what they're doing, and if you don't know the comic source material that they're making fun of, you might sort of take it seriously, and that's what was really cool about it. And I honestly think that's a lot of why it had staying power, because they perceived it more as a joke, and then it kind of became its own solid thing. So I don't know, like when I was a kid, I always wondered, or at least when I was in high school and the 2003 show started, I was like, is this thing going to stay around? Like, I thought everybody forgot about this. It's got legs?
Yeah, it's really ironic that a comic that basically took Daredevil's origin and tacked Turtles onto it, like, literally, Matt Murdock gets blinded in the first issue of Ninja Turtles and drops a bowl of the Turtles into the sewer, and the canister that blinds him falls into the sewer after them. It's just an extension of the Daredevil origin, really. That became more popular than Daredevil himself.
It's bizarre. I gotta tell you, even in the early 2000s, I could have never guessed it would have turned into what it is now. And I mean, like, Turtle Fever was everywhere in the 90s. So I mean, like, you know, Eastman and Laird were beside themselves. And I've seen them in interviews talk about how impossible it was to keep their company together because it got bigger and bigger and it was still just them running it, and they didn't know what to do. It was a really interesting problem to have. And, you know, in the 90s with the cartoon show, with the films, with the video games, with everything that there was, it was huge and crazy for the kids, but I never thought I would see a day where adults took it seriously.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that the Ninja Turtles, the same sort of thing happened to them that happened with like all the other superhero quote characters, where they were originally in their most popular incarnation designed to entertain children. Like Batman, when it was first created, and wasn't necessarily created as that sort of thing because everybody read comics, here and there. In the 40s and in the early 30s, it was sort of widely accepted that anybody could read comics. It was comics for, housewives, like soap opera, romance comics, and comics for girls, comics for boys. Everybody read comics. And then later on, as they, started catering more towards children, they got goofier. And the Ninja Turtles obviously didn't start out as a kids' entertainment thing, the Mirage comics, but it became that in the animated series, and then it sort of did the reverse as it went along later on. And it'll be interesting to see what sort of path it takes now that Paramount owns the rights to it, and Viacom owns the rights to it, because we're seeing a interesting, and I think the best way that it could go, where we have a version in the animated series on Nickelodeon that's accessible for kids, but not stupid, and we have a comic book that is perfect for adults to read and really complex, has a lot of interesting ideas in it, and it's deep, and the character is really nuanced, and hopefully the film doesn't ruin all of these things and have it come crashing down.
I never perceived Ninja Turtles when I was little watching it as something that there would be a lot of different incarnations of. It was, it felt like it's supposed to be this kiddie cartoon. Of course, when you're 6 or 7 watching something like this, up through 10, 11, whatever, you're not really thinking of it as stupid kid entertainment. I was taking it seriously. You know what I mean? We were playing with all the action figures and things, and it seemed kind of edgy to us because you had Slash. And he was really rough around the edges, and he had Rat King. And I think that when I was a kid, me and my friends, and I had a lot of friends that were really into Ninja Turtles, and we all played with the figures and stuff.
Yeah, me too.
We all really hated each other for the cool stuff that they had, but but we didn't, and that kind of thing. I always wanted that module thing with the sharp spitting top on the top that came from the Technodrome and came out. Like, they made that, and I had a friend that had one, and I was always angry I never got one of those. But anyway, we all kind of took it seriously, but I was like that with a lot of things. I mean, like when I was really little, I didn't know 60s Batman was supposed to be funny. Those death traps were like scary for me. You know? So then fast forward, and now there's all these different incarnations, and there's the more serious versions, and there's the goofier, kiddier versions, and then there's whatever Michael Bay's ends up being. And like I said, I didn't see it as something that had all these different, where there would be all these different incarnations, and yet this is not new. There's just about to be more all at the same time than there ever has been before. It's weird that these four, because you're not talking about like a single character like with Batman, where there's all these different versions, there's different ways you can do it. But these four different characters with very specific, distinct personalities, and it's archetypal, and they each have kind of the one or two big things that define them. And it's not something that you would really think of as something that you could do in 25 different ways. And yet, they've all been pretty successful. Well, most of them.
Yeah, I agree. It'll be really interesting to see, now that we've gotten so many different incarnations, and now that we have what I would say the most successful incarnation of, I mean, barring the 03 anime series, because I think that before they went into the future and then came back, I think that's probably the best Turtles animated series we've had, writing-wise. I haven't watched enough of the new show to really compare it, so I don't really want to speak on that too much. But at least comic book-wise, I think we can agree that Turtles is the best place it's ever been.
That's what I think. And also, not nearly enough people are reading it.
No, not nearly enough people, and it'll be really interesting to see how the film affects all of this, because as a film franchise, the Turtles have only really had one really successful movie. I mean, the second and third movie made money, but like, I think the way critics perceive things is more important to studios than it used to be. Maybe the Transformers films would be a direct argument against that, but I think word of mouth, at least with this Ninja Turtles movie, is going to be a little bit different than already have a bunch of people speaking out against it before the thing has even come out, and
it's hurt it. I don't know how much it's going to hurt it money wise, but it's going to hurt it. I would like to think that if it is that if it's very Transformers-esque, or if it's very contrary to what mega Ninja Turtles fans would like it to be, if it's catering too much to a general audience, but you know, it's catering so much to a general audience that none of the general audience really likes it all that much, you know, that sort of thing. I like to think that Turtles as a franchise is in a good enough place right now that it could survive that a giant blockbuster film, even if it were to lose money, it's not going to kill people's interest in this. It's not going to be like Lone Ranger. But it's all in a place than that was. So, I don't know. I'm not worried about it. I don't need that film to be good.
I mean, I would hope so. I think the Turtles have whoever, even before Viacom bought up the rights to this franchise, whoever was behind the marketing for the Turtles was a genius in noticing that there was a market for bringing the merchandising stuff for this back. I mean, I remember seeing Ninja Turtles t-shirts and stuff in places like Spencer's and Hot Topic, like, you know, 5 years ago, when, like, I thought I was the only one that remembered the Turtles and enjoyed them. I don't know, like, I think they have enough merchandising around that people will remember them, but, like, three critically panned movies in a row, I don't know how that's gonna how the Turtles are going to fare, you know what I mean, as a film franchise. And then if you have them stuck in kids' cartoon and comic book territory, which is a medium that nobody really reads anymore, I don't know how well they'll still be able to permeate in the culture, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking about it a little bit in more of a lighthearted sort of way, because I don't know how badly I need like more Turtles movies.
I'm just worried about it as a franchise and how it'll damage the image of it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't know. At the same time, I mean, like, just remember that it started off as this really gritty comic book. A couple years later, it becomes like the complete opposite of it, and it not only survived that, but it was super popular because of that. And then in 2003, we got like the best of both worlds with that really good, like you said, at least for the first few seasons, animated series. I'm just saying that, like, I think it's gonna survive that, and even if it doesn't, this is not a franchise that I ever thought would get to the point that it's at right now anyway. So it's pretty exciting just to get the sheer amount of good turtle stuff that we've gotten. When I was a kid, I had this I keep saying that when I was a kid. When I was in high school, I had this this weird period, this weird crossroads where I almost got rid of all my turtle stuff.
Yeah.
Because again, like you said, people weren't talking about it. I saw it as kind of a kiddie thing. It was hard to. I was finding it difficult to validate to myself why I was still a fan of it. Why I still like, and I couldn't decide if I was a fan. I was like, am I a fan of this, or was it just this kind of kids nostalgia thing? Because there were other things when I was a kid that I really, really liked that aren't that big of a deal to me now. So
right.
I kind of I mean, like, you know, Power Rangers is somewhat of that kind of a thing. I still like appreciate and enjoy and collect the old stuff, but I don't care about it moving forward. And I thought Ninja Turtles would be like that. The 03 series started, and I watched that, and I went, wow, there's actually, like, possible dimension for this thing for adults, and I kept all my stuff, and I became more okay with considering myself a Ninja Turtles fan. So yeah, I'm with you, though. A giant film could certainly taint the image of it for the mass audience, for regular people. I also think that it could, you know, a few years down the road, somebody else could get their hands on it and make something different. I think it is big enough that it really, I think the same thing could happen with Batman. That not that it's Batman, but I think that it's big enough that it could survive a Batman and Robin. It could have like a really bad movie, and then a few years go by and people are kind of like, I don't know about Turtles, and then somebody comes along and makes something a little closer to what we got in, you know, 89 or in 1990. I also gotta say that the 90 film is so close to, I mean, is so what the Mirage comic was, and yet more accessible to just a general audience. I'm not sure if they can ever be beaten.
That's a very good point. That film, I don't know where the critics were when that movie came out, but they were completely unfair with it. All of the reviews I see of that movie around the time it came out, they didn't even... It was like they were talking about the third movie when they went to go see the first one. They were talking about how it was cheese for the sake of cheese. It was just a marketing ploy to get people to buy action figures and things like that, and I didn't see it that way at all. There's a legitimate story there, as you know you've discussed in your Severe Rewind and all of those of the movie and all those sorts of things. This new movie's probably going to be the Turtles' origin again, which I suppose is fine because if we haven't had a movie since 1990 that people haven't seen, you know what I mean? Like the Turtles' origin isn't as ingrained in our culture as like the Spider-Man or the Superman or the Batman ones. So I suppose it's fine that we're getting to retell that again. But I don't know. The people that are working on this movie, you got Michael Bay as a producer, that worried a lot of people, and then you get Jonathan Liebsman, who's a director that has never made a good movie. They cast Megan Fox as April O'Neil. The Turtles are a bunch of actors that I'm not really all that familiar with. But at the same time, Eastman talks it up all the time and says that the script is great and that, Turtle fans shouldn't worry. And Eastman is working on the comic book, which is, the best Turtles thing ever right now. So
Eastman has never struck me as the kind of guy who just goes for sound bites and says what a
No, he's a very genuine guy. I met him in person at Boston Comic Con last year, and he did he's such a nice guy. He did quick sketches of whatever turtle you would want it for everybody in line for free. He just loves the fans, appreciates everybody, and he's very honest. And I had a conversation with him, and he came off as a very genuine guy when I met him. So I agree with you. I don't think he would have said that if he didn't mean it.
And for those of you that aren't used to conventions and don't know the ropes for this kind of thing, somebody as famous as Eastman doing sketches for free, nobody does that.
No. And the line...
that. Most people as big, as well known as he is, won't sign for free.
Yeah, he stayed on the convention floor after the convention closed so he could meet and talk to and sketch for all the fans. I waited in line for a couple hours, but because he was so nice and I wanted to meet the guy, I waited, and it paid off. I really had an enjoyable experience talking with him. So, yeah, I'm with you. It'll be interesting to see how everything pans out. And at the same time, to play devil's advocate with my own argument, Paramount just paid a good amount of money to get this franchise. I don't see them making a bad movie and then just giving up and not trying to make a property they paid a lot of money for be viable, especially since they just lost their deal with Marvel in distributing their films.
Good point. Yeah, the thing that would really... The worst case scenario would be the film is really bad and it makes oodles of money.
Yes, that would be worst case scenario. Which
is kind of what the Transformers were like. I mean, I don't hate the first film, but I don't like the sequels that much. But anyway, I'm just saying that a lot of people talk those movies down real hard, and that's fair. And that's an example of movies that were critically panned, that made a lot of money, and every time they put one out, it was huge. That's why they're doing more of them. So Ninja Turtles. The best thing that can happen, obviously, is we all eat our hats when this thing comes out, and it's way better than any of us expected. You can make you can still make a pretty decent film, even with actors that you don't really want if the script is great. Mm-hmm. And so even if you don't want Megan Fox's April O'Neil, she could surprise us. I mean, I don't want to count that out. It could happen. Mm-hmm. I'm not expecting that. I get it, but it could happen. But even then, how big of a role is she going to play? How giant will April O'Neil be in this particular version? We don't know. We don't know much of anything. But what spells potential disaster from the beginning is that they told us so much out the gate that everybody immediately threw a fit about. They've been changing things, screwing with the dials, and I mean, the first big thing was, they're going to be aliens, and now they've said, okay, no, wait, we've changed that now because too many people were complaining about it. The last thing I read was we took that part out, whatever that originally was. I mean, I had heard things like, don't worry, the origin is sort of from space, but they're not aliens really, and that. But apparently that's no longer in the script. But I don't know. Right. So anyway, whatever. Who knows?
It'll be very interesting to see. I'm really hoping that it's at least an enjoyable movie to some degree, and it's just such a predictable move to give it to Michael Bay. It's sort of like the Christopher Nolan Warner Brothers thing. But Warner Brothers had done this with Superman. Before they take the guy that made them a successful Batman movie, and they think, because he made a movie with a guy in a cape in it, he'll be able to make this movie with a guy in a cape in it. It'll be successful and be good. Michael Bay took a dead in the water pretty much in terms of film wise and cultural wise. Besides the toys, the franchise was popular in the 80s with people because it had a successful cartoon, and made it into a movie that was pretty big. So we're going to give an 80s franchise we just bought that was popular back then to him.
That had an enormous toy line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A popular cartoon.
In a popular cartoon, yeah, it's the same sort of thing. The genesis of each of those things is a little bit different, but they're similar in that way. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the difference is Transformers, to do right in live action, you need big bucks. Because you have giant, enormous robots, and we need to buy them fighting in the real world. Fine. Ninja Turtles, I have always thought, is something that should be done on more of a minimalistic scale.
Yeah, it's just a low-key kind of thing. I mean, they're ninjas. There shouldn't be giant, large-scale action scenes because they're supposed to fight covertly. You're not even supposed to see them when they're doing their job effectively. So...
There is immediately a more subdued, kind of scaled-back component to that when it's at its best. That's why in Turtles, I've always felt like at its worst is not at its worst, because I enjoy the original cartoon, it being really over the top. I also like 60s Batman. But I guess the point I'm making is that when you're doing serious Turtles, at its worst, you go way too far and you make it all about the space and the alien stuff. I just don't think that Turtles works as well in that world. I mean,
it can work. We saw that Neutrino arc in the comics work really well.
Seen that in the comics. I guess my point is that's not where I would want to start in live action.
Oh, definitely not.
I just feel like you oughta keep that, you oughta start street level with that, at the very least. But I mean, like, I'm just saying, yeah, you would need big bucks if you were gonna send the turtles to space and if you were gonna do all of that kind of stuff with, like, the rhinoceros guys and whatever. But I don't, or if you were gonna do a Dimension X component in live action, but I don't need that. I feel like that works better in comics or in animation. If you're going to do live action, I guess, and maybe I'm projecting my perceptions because I love the 90 film and that's what it did. Mm-hmm. So all I'm saying is, there we successfully saw the Turtles done in more of a minimalistic way. A lot of the action was scaled back. There's a lot of stuff done in shadows and stuff, at least at the beginning, before you get to see them, and that sort of thing. And it seems like that just for this idea works better.
I agree. And I have a feeling we're going to get something
proven wrong. But then again, I'd also love if they were going to do a big, giant, huge-scale Ninja Turtles thing with a whole bunch of money behind it to hear, hey, we're using Krang, and we're going to have robot foot soldiers, and that sort of thing.
I think that's the idea. I think they did announce that Krang is going to be the villain of the movie, but I'm not sure if that's been confirmed or not, 100%.
It could work.
Yeah, and, Krang would be cool to see on the big screen because he's like the major Turtles villain we don't see a whole lot of because he wasn't in the original Raj stuff, and famously Peter Laird hates the '87 cartoon with a passion, and when he had the rights, he kind of had a boycott in using all of that sort of stuff, and that's why Krang was never used. So that could be interesting. It's just that I'm with you. I prefer the low key ninja stuff. Like that Neutrino arc in the comics was fun, but as soon as we got back to the city and we're doing the City Fall stuff now, man, I'm so much more engaged in it than I was before that. Not that I wasn't engaged before, but you know what I mean.
You want to hear something really interesting about that too?
Sure.
You're not the only one. I looked at the numbers on this, and during the Neutrino arc, the comic was averaging around 16,000 sold is all it was doing per month.
Yeah.
It wasn't even beating out Spawn, which is sort of sad.
That's sad.
Yeah, and then City Fall started, and yeah, it's kind of an event, although it's not like IDW has been harping it up that hard.
Right.
I mean, it's just, okay, now it's got a name on the cover. But the first issue of that sold 27,000. What's that about?
Yeah, that's a great point.
It jumped from 16 to 27, and we went back to street level. Is there a connection? Possibly.
Yeah, I think that's very telling.
I just think that most people like seeing the Ninja Turtles as actual ninjas.
Yeah, I agree. It's sort of strange considering that I'm such a big Daredevil fan as I am now. Like I was a fan of Ninja Turtles when I was little. Didn't even know really what Daredevil was until 2003 when the movie came out, and all the sensibilities are there for me as a fan. You know what I mean? It makes so much sense.
Yeah, it's really ironic that Daredevil and Ninja Turtles continue to be the two books that you and I are touting up as the best things on the market.
That's a very good point. I never made that connection. That's interesting. One of the things I wanted to ask you, because this is sort of the elephant in the room for every Turtles fan, is who's your favorite of the four?
Oh yeah, my favorite growing up was Donatello.
He's my favorite.
And I think now it's kind of maybe shifted more toward Raphael, but I hate saying that because that's kind of everybody's. But again, I think that if I had to choose, and it's tough, if you were going to like put a gun to my head and I had to pick my favorite incarnation of the Turtles, I'd probably say the 90 movie at this point. And I love that movie because of Raphael's character arc. I mean, that's the big thing that it had going for it with me, besides obviously the aesthetic and Shredder. Yeah. But of the four Turtles, the only one that, besides Leonardo, but only in connection with Raphael, the only character that really gets a major arc in that movie is Raphael.
Yeah, and, when you look at all of the Turtle incarnations that did it seriously and tried to do a nuanced characterization before the 03 series, Raphael was the only one that really got anything to do. So it's very easy to pick Raphael as your favorite because he's the one that got the most attention, and there's a reason for that. He was Eastman's favorite turtle of the four, and that's why he got a lot of focus in the early books, and that's why when, they adapted the comics later on, Raphael had the focus in the movie and all those sorts of things.
He's the only character that, gets his own, human to pal around with. And
right, exactly.
Stuff. There's just more for him to do. And plus the whole Raphael in a trench coat thing is hilarious.
Yeah, and I think they're trying to remedy that with some of the more recent incarnations. Like, we had talked a lot about how the stuff with Donatello and how he's dealing with that reincarnation idea in the current series is fascinating. And in the newest cartoon, Donatello has someone to pal around with. It's is Donatello's sidekick, and Casey Jones isn't anywhere to be seen.
Yeah, and I think that's I think it's really interesting because I think part of the reason that Donatello is almost I haven't seen very many episodes of that show, but he seems to be almost the main turtle in the new show, or at least he's the one with the most fun characterization. I think that's just because they've got Paulson voicing him. If he's not doing Raphael and he's doing Donatello instead, everybody wants to hear more Paulson, so they're giving him all the cool stuff to do. But that's fine because the thing is, there's a lot to mine with this property, and it's interesting because it had 10 seasons of the original show. It had at least 6, if not 7. I think 6 of the 03 series.
Yeah,
now it's got a third series. Now it's got an ongoing comic again with IDW jumping around all over the place. There's tons of this, and yet there's so much to mine that's never really been done before because the Turtles, besides Raphael, a lot of them, there's a lot of characterization that just hasn't been explored. There's a lot of stuff that we can do. There's a lot of things with Casey Jones that you can run with. I want to say that April O'Neil is probably the character who has had the most variation throughout the different versions.
She's almost completely different every time you see her, which is interesting. I mean, there's always the core sort of thing where she's like the Turtles, where she doesn't really fit in anywhere, and that's why they come together and, become a quasi-family kind of thing. And it doesn't, her age varies from place to place, but she always, finds solace and comfort in these mutant turtles and their right father, which is interesting. And, she's always got that sort of proactive attitude, too, where she's, a go-getter, and, if there's a problem, she wants to address it and solve it. That's pretty consistent with April's character all the way through. But other than that, her profession varies, her age varies.
And isn't that unusual, too, because her being kind of like the human confidant for those characters, for the Turtles and for Splinter, with other characters that kind of fill that role in other things, their profession doesn't generally change. Alfred has always been a butler, most of the time, I think always, and even in the new Beware the Batman show where he's doing more field work and stuff, he's still the butler.
Right. I mean, Lois Lane's always a reporter, Jimmy Olsen's always a photographer, Mary Jane's always a model. The list goes on and on. That's one of the things I sort of like about the Turtles as a property is, like, you can keep the core personalities of these characters and change so many other things about them and still retain the basic things that people enjoy about them. Like, the new cartoon, they're quite a bit younger than they used to be, and their characterizations are a little bit different, but you see those core little personality traits come through the surface every so often when they have a character arc, and we're getting them to that place where they become the Turtles that we love, and the ones that sort of we begin with at the beginning of, the new comic series or the 90 movie, and it's really interesting. I like that about it a lot.
Yeah, I would not have expected this, but one thing that I think has really kind of changed over the years with the Turtles is or at least not really changed, because in the original comic series, I think that each of the Turtles was a bit more distinct, and I mean, they were certainly kind of archetypes, but when you go to the cartoon show, which is more of what permeated the culture, naturally,
Right.
I really do think it is the kind of thing where they all have sort of, I mean, they have different hobbies, but they're a little bit more like Power Rangers, where they're sort of collectively the protagonist, as opposed to four separate protagonists that all
Right.
the same story. And so as time has gone on and evolved, we've gotten them a little bit closer to that place, and sometimes even given them more dimension than the original comics, where they're not together one person collectively, but rather four different protagonists that all share the same story. So now, like in the IDW comic again, you could do a whole issue about one of those characters, and it would have been harder to do that before. Like, I don't think, for instance, and I think that these are characters that somewhat come out of this mold with what Ninja Turtles started. The Powerpuff Girls are collectively a character. Each of them is a personality trait that you put all three of them together, and you have one distinct. Kind of, you have one protagonist in the three of them, and I don't think in the best incarnations now of the Ninja Turtles that's the case. I think they're all kind of their own person.
Yeah, I agree. It's become like a team book sort of thing, like the Avengers or the Justice League, where you have all these clashing personalities and you have to figure out how to accept each other's flaws and love each other despite that, and work together, use teamwork, that sort of thing. And that's one of the endearing themes of the Turtles that's always run through it, is that theme of family. We talk about that all the time when we review the Turtles books, not just the issues that focus on them themselves, but even like the villains. That's a major defining theme that defines all the characters in that universe, and whether they have a family, whether they don't, how they fit in. Ninja Turtles a lot about fitting into not just family, but society in general. They're teenagers, but and inherently they're outcasts because they're big mutant turtles, that sort of thing. That's one of the things that's I think has kept them so endearing in the culture and things like that too, because they're ideas that aren't going to go away in the foreseeable future, at least.
Yeah, that's right, and then they have the added bonus of being kind of quirky, because it's just a weird thing to have big giant turtles, and then they inherently have an action component, and everybody likes ninjas, and that kind of thing. But going back to the idea of these multiple incarnations, I guess I'm kind of fixated on this now because there's now so many different incarnations of the Turtles, and it's funny too because that was even a huge component to Turtles Forever, that movie that merged the '80s show with the 2000 show.
I really enjoyed that.
I really enjoyed that, and it's interesting that a couple of the now biggest. Not biggest, but a couple of new popular versions of that didn't even exist yet when that came out, and you had that scene where they show you a whole bunch of things that had existed previously, and it's like, wow, this has already been a thing, that there's been so many incarnations of this. One thing I think that theoretically affords you is the ability to take them in places that you couldn't if you only had one version, where you wouldn't want certain things to be permanent in the status quo. For instance, this has never been done, and I'd like to see it done in a version. I don't mean necessarily in the new movie or in IDW. I just mean a version of Ninja Turtles that was taking itself kind of seriously. I'd love to see a version where Splinter dies and the Turtles have to deal with that. That seems like the natural thing to eventually get to when you have that kind of a mentor character. I like how the IDW series has made him such an integral part where again, he's his own character and he has really interesting stories about just him. But it's about the Turtles. They're your main characters. So wouldn't it be neat to kind of see what it would be like without him at some point, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think the IDW series is moving in a direction where we're going to see that family dynamic broken up, obviously with the Seafall thing, where Leonardo is going to be removed as the leader of the team, and the Turtles will sort of realize, well, they especially would butt heads with Leo, and all the time. Classically, that's the classic conflict, is Raphael thinks he can be a better leader than Leonardo, and they have philosophy disagreements about how the team should be led. And it'll be interesting to see how the Turtles deal without having their leader, not just with them, because they've been without a member before, he's injured or something, but like having one of them turn on him. That'll be really interesting to see. I don't think I've ever seen that in an incarnation of the Turtles before.
Like I said, I just feel like there's a whole lot of coal to mine in this stuff.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, and yeah, I think you hit on something before too. You know, saying that it's such a quirky idea that they're all four like really big mutant turtles. That's just a look that makes this so distinct from anything else. The recognizability of it, you know, the four turtles with the masks, all multicolored. It's a look that, if it permeates the culture immediately, lends itself to becoming sort of iconic, you know, because it's such a simple but memorable look.
Yeah, and it's also one of those cool things that it's memorable. It's not just memorable, but it's not so recognizable that you could tell what it is in silhouette, which is something that's done a whole lot and was done a lot in the Mirage comics, but also later on, and it's something that even the sillier versions will do at some point. Look, they're in silhouette, you know, because it looks cool, and that sort of thing. Like it's just they're super recognizable, and it's not the sort of thing that you would ever think, or at least you would have thought in the 80s, oh, someday we're going to call this iconic. But yeah, I agree with you. It absolutely is that. And I think that also what helps it is just the familiarity of the whole idea. And you were touching on that a lot earlier. You know, this idea of outcast teenagers and that sort of thing is never going to go away. But also, you know, each of the archetypes are really recognizable things. You've got the party guy. You always have to have that. You have the staunch leader who doesn't have much of a sense of humor. That sort of thing. In our modern era, you've always got to have the guy who's really great at computers. And then you've got the guy that's kind of a jerk face that nobody gets along with, and who you know, you've always got to have that. But also like I don't know what it is about the number 4. But I mean, this happens a lot. That's kind of a magic number of 4 protagonists in the same thing. It became more, as time went on, more 5 became a bigger thing. And I don't know why that is, because you had 5 with both Power Rangers and with Captain Planet.
Yeah, I mean, and some people could argue with Turtles that it's 5 too, if you include Splinter as a main component of that. And now the IDW series is making an argument for April and Casey being integral parts to that family, and
much more so than they have been in other things. Yeah,
right, which is so interesting. I really like that about it.
And it's also just a really colorful, eclectic cast of characters. Turtles has so many villains that everybody recognizes and remembers now, and it's kind of a testament to it that something that could have been really generic has lasted and has not been so generic. Whoever thought Baxter Stockman would be a character that would stick around? He was just a random scientist who built some mousers. In the early comics. There's no reason that guy should have stuck around, but he has. He's been in most incarnations.
I think it's even more astounding that Shredder has become as big of a thing that he has, because he's basically just
cool.
It is so cool, because I love the Shredder, but Beastman and Laird have said that they were inspired by a cheese grater they had in their kitchen to his armor and make him a supervillain. And he's, look-wise, basically Darth Vader with cheese graters on him, and he's a ninja. And the character has become so much more than that through, it's a testament to the writers who worked on all this stuff over the years. And even when he first showed up, he was just a one-off. In the first issue, he showed up and he was killed. I find that so fascinating that that's the character they latched onto for the 87 cartoon when they adapted it. They were like, oh, we'll make this guy the main villain of the show.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that a lot of this is just happy accidents, but that's not to demean the imagination of the creators, because this is what you have to do to create things that permeate the culture. You have to throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, and try weird things, take risks, and most importantly, this thing has stuck around because it was such a original seeming thing that was also based on other things. This is how culture works. We build on top of things that already exist and either improve upon or take things in a different direction. We've got to quit, not to get on my soapbox, but we've got to quit only creating or mostly creating entertainment that is just new permeations of old things, because it stagnates culture. So the way you create the next Ninja Turtles or the next Batman or the next Lost or the next whatever it is not to try to do that again, but to create something the way those people did, which was try stuff and see if it works.
I agree. I think one of the best quotes I've heard in relation to that in a long time was Joss Whedon said something in an interview. They were asking him about what he would do if he got Star Wars Episode 7. And he told the people, he said, I would not bring the original cast back. I would not use them at all. I would create characters that would resonate with the audiences for the same reason that those characters did in 79 or 77. That's the way you got to do it. And, Star Wars is a perfect example of something that's just, an amalgamation of just ideas that people liked, and it threw it all into one really good-looking, well-constructed package. And Turtles is the same sort of thing.
Yeah, we keep building on these old ideas. Now, that's not to say that I think that Ninja Turtles should have its day and be finished, that we shouldn't have any more of it, because, like I said, I think there's still more places to go with it. But I'm saying that I wish that more studios, more commercial entities could manage to see the value in, throwing more stuff at the wall and creating more original things and seeing if we can come up with the next Ninja Turtles for our generation and not just have to keep creating the same thing that, we had as kids for our kids. I would love my kid to have his really awesome thing that I didn't have when I was a kid. And I don't know what that's going to be, but there's not a lot of new original things coming out. And in the 80s, we were inundated with all kinds of stuff that nobody had ever seen before.
Oh yeah, I think one of the only studios that does that on a consistent basis now is Pixar.
That's right, and then they keep alive all their old stuff too.
Yeah, very true.
Just saying that both things can happen. You can do both at the same time.
Right. So I'm really cautiously optimistic for the future of the Turtles, I would say. What would you say about the future of this thing moving forward, with the new movie coming out, the comic series, and the TV show? I agree.
I'm sorry, I missed the last thing you said.
Oh, sorry. I'd agree with you. I think it's in a pretty good place right now, as of...
Yeah. It's in a great place right now. I'd love to be optimistic enough to think that it's not necessarily as volatile as you were maybe making it out earlier, with the possibility of the new film, crashing and burning and then making everybody hate Ninja Turtles. I don't think that would happen. I just think that the thing has been around long enough now that even if the new thing was really awful, even general audiences would be like, well, that's not representative of Turtles at large necessarily. This is not going to be the first time that most people have ever seen Turtles. In exactly the same way that people didn't suddenly just hate Batman after Batman and Robin.
Well, the thing that scares me about it, though, is you look at the reviews of the 90 film, and it was generally received by people who weren't kids as just Hollywood advertising trash. And the second film was like that. The third film was like that. The 87 cartoon series was like that. And those are really the things that are remembered by people as the Turtles things. People don't remember the Mirage comics. People aren't going to remember the 2003 series or the newer series as necessarily representative of what they know of the Turtles. You know what I mean? Like, if they go to this new movie and they go, oh, this just confirmed all the suspicions I had about this thing, or my preconceived notions I had about this thing before.
I see why you're saying that. At the same time, I think that that the general feeling on this film has been so negative on the outset that I'm not 100% convinced that it's going to reflect on the franchise itself all that much. I mean, I feel like there's going to be a lot more of an animosity toward this project. And that the people who don't know the Turtles might pick up on that and be like, okay, well, all the people that know this thing think this is going to be, really terrible. But I don't know. I also feel like the majority of people that would go to this are either taking their kids if it ends up being that kind of a movie, I don't know. But I mean, like, I feel like a lot of people are going to either take their kids or they're going to go because they remember the 90 movie or something.
Right, yes.
So I just feel like there's going to be preconceptions already, but most people that are going to have those preconceptions, it's going to be positive memories of this thing. And it's going to be more like all the remakes we have these days, Dan. It's not going to be so much people, I think, for the most part, it's not going to be so much people going, is there, or what is this Ninja Turtles thing? And then how is it? It's going to be more, does this live up to my expectations based on what I already know? So I don't know. I don't think it can kill it. I think if it sucks, everybody's just going to want something better.
I hope it doesn't. I'm just sort of playing the general audience devil's advocate perspective, I suppose, just because I think as people that are so engrossed in this stuff and talking about it and researching the films and stuff all the time, I personally will forget sometimes that, you know, people don't have thoughts about these sort of things that I do. You know, like,
Oh, yeah,
if, you know, like, not everybody's going to be following the negative reactions to the production of this film. They're just going to see, you know, the name Ninja Turtles on the, you know, on the listings for the movie theater, and they're going to say, oh, the Ninja Turtles movie is out, let's go see it. And then it's awful, and they come out and they're like, well, I don't want anything to do with that anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
But, I mean, I'd love to be optimistic about it, and, you know, I never want to see something that I'm a fan of, you know, go sour and die. But I'm with you, though, like, just for monetary reasons, what Paramount paid for this thing, I don't think they're going to let it die. And as a toy line, it probably makes enough money to sustain itself anyway.
Yeah. The nice thing is, I'll tell you this. I'll admit, I would feel worse about it if they hadn't been handling the new cartoon series the way they've been handling it. And I don't even mean the series itself necessarily. I've watched a couple episodes. It's okay. It's not really my bag, but you know, it's kind of fun. I guess I would probably be watching it more if I didn't have the IDW series, which is a lot closer to what I want.
Right.
But you know, and I can read a comic book over watching a TV show because I love comic books. But the thing is, the merchandising for that show has been fantastic. It has been. It looks like what they were doing in '87. I mean, they've gone back to that model and they put out the same kinds of toys. Some of it better, but I mean, like, they put out so much stuff, and then they got the thing with the license with Lego, all of that. So I mean, I feel like that's helping the image already, and that's gonna be kind of solidifying that a little bit. So I think the thing that gives me the most pause about the new movie, besides just things we've heard so far that, of course, we don't really care for that much as fans, is I don't know if I want to see it that much in the limelight. I don't know if I want Ninja Turtles to be a multi-million-dollar motion picture.
Yeah, it's going to be very strange to see it as a multi-million-dollar motion picture, because that's something we've never seen before.
This used to be more underground. I mean, yeah, it had TV shows, and yeah, it had a movie, and yeah, it was a mega. It was one of those things that was underground but really popular, if that makes any sense at all. Like you know, the studio that put out TMNT in 2007 wasn't even a giant studio. It was still that small of a thing. And so like looking at it now, if it turns into that big huge giant thing, I'm going to meet you halfway and say, because I'm trying to be optimistic about this, but I want to meet you halfway and say at least it could hurt it in the sense that Transformers fans still love Transformers, but they sure wish their beloved franchise had been turned into that. Some of them.
Right, yeah.
So, you know, there's that. And then, of course, there's plenty of other Transformers things they can consume, but that was the big thing that people now think of when they think of Transformers. So, yes, I would not want this, if it's bad, to be the thing people start thinking of when they think of Ninja Turtles. And it could happen. In the same way that, and sorry for folks that liked this movie, but in the same way that I would hate for folks to think of The Lone Ranger as that movie with Johnny Depp, when that's not, in my mind, what it really ought to be.
Oh, yeah, especially since The Lone Ranger is such a staple of Americana, really. It's so unfortunate that it was misrepresented in that way. But I'm with you, man. Like, I want to be optimistic about it too. And to be honest, like, as long as that IDW series sticks around because the movie makes money, and I'll read that comic book and have my Turtles fix satisfied because it's that good.
Let me ask you this question: is there any chance it bombs?
The Turtles movie?
Yeah.
I don't know. It depends on how they advertise it.
Don't you think it'll be everywhere?
I think that, based on how they advertise the show, you made that great point of how great the advertising and merchandising has been for that. I don't think that they dropped the ball with the movie at all, no. So, it'll be interesting.
I don't think it'll bomb. I'm not sure if it'll necessarily do mega bucks. I think but I would be very surprised if it didn't perform. No matter what they put out, I'd be really surprised if it didn't perform.
At least opening weekend, anyway.
Yeah, partly just because it's live action again, and we haven't had that in forever. And it's people with a certain kind of clout, even if it's not what you and I would like. Michael Bay's not directing it, but the man's producing it, and he's put out, these movies that have made ridiculous amounts of money.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, anyway, we're coming up on about an hour, so we're and head off. But there's plenty of other things we could talk about with Ninja Turtles. We can cover every permutation, Dan. We didn't talk about next mutation or anything.
Yeah, I thought of that during the conversation, and I decided not to bring it up because it's probably best left that way.
Well, anyway, thanks everybody for listening. I sure hope you enjoyed it. Dan, thanks for randomly, for no good reason, talking with me for an hour about Ninja Turtles.
Oh, no problem. I love talking with you on here, and I love the Ninja Turtles, so it was a good time.
Well, Dan and I will see you next time we do new acquisitions, and until then, I'm Captain Logan.
I'm Dan.
See you later.